in 3 weeks, if no one lists the house, there literally are no homes to buy in the city of Chicago.
What's the 5 Ps? Do you remember it?
Proper preparation prevents poor performance.
There you go. It doesn't matter how much money we get. If we don't close, it's no money, right? So no close is no money. I'm everything that I am because of my dad's death. And I wouldn't be as successful without his death.
Hello and welcome to the Jason Theory. We had a little 2-week break, but we're back. And we are going to talk about 2 main topics today within this time frame, about 25 minutes. The first one's going to be the Federal Reserve. We're going to talk about what it is, kind of break it down to what my father used to say, KISS. That's a Leonism. So we'll get into Leonisms. That's one of them. KISS is keep it simple, stupid. So I am going to explain the Fed the way I explained it to my 15-year-old, my 11-year-old, and my 5-year-old. My 5-year-old did not get it yet, but my 11, my 15-year-old did. So we're going to break that down really easy. And then the second half of the podcast is going to be stupid things people say to me in open houses and things that people say that I can't believe in open houses. We're going to go into that because it's been a couple weeks. I've been pretty active on the open houses because of new listings, and the things that are said to me are phenomenal. So maybe you won't say those things so that you don't sound that way, or maybe you'll take something from it. All right. So thanks again for listening. You can find us on Apple Play, Spotify, and we'll also on the social media, we'll push out the link to subscribe to the pod. Okay, so first off, I want to talk about the Fed because the Fed raised rates this week. You guys will get this in a couple days, so it'll be a little bit after, but the Fed raised rates by a half a basis point. And I was talking to people, and it's interesting to me that a lot of people just don't have the basic Econ 101 of what the Fed is. The Federal Reserve, the central banking system. And this is like, to me, this is something you have to know, right? Almost like which way traffic runs on a street in America, right? You have to know this stuff because this is how they control money. And money is how this world works. Currency, right? This is how we exchange, be it wampums or whatever it is, right? So let's talk about the fact the Federal Reserve is, now listen, I'm going to explain this easy. So if you have your MBA in finance, or you are a banker, or you're something like that, I'm not doing this podcast for the 5% out there. I'm doing it for the 95% of people out there that kind of want to know the basics of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is a central bank that dictates monetary policy. Monetary policy is money policy. Monetary things are monetary, money. And how they dictate that policy is putting money into the system, into America, and taking money out of America. And by doing that, it controls how much people are willing to spend and how much people will spend for things because of the power of that dollar. Okay, so the central banking system has what's called an overnight lending rate, okay? And I was thinking about how to explain this to people. Overnight lending rate is the same way that you would basically buy a car from GM, right? GM will sell those cars to the dealerships, and the dealerships sell it to you. Think of it that way. The central banking system has all the money, and they sell that money to a bank, and then that bank sells that money to you. Now, selling with money is borrowing. So they lend money to Chase, PNC, your local bank, and then PNC, Chase, whatever you use, Bank of America, lends that money to you. In that process, everybody makes money. There's a rate. That interest rate is what you pay to borrow that money. When the Federal Reserve raises or lower rates, they are raising or lowering the amount that it costs to borrow that money. So as they lower rates to your Chase then in turn lowers rates to lend to you. The lower the rates are, the more money people borrow. As they borrow more money gets out into the system, into the world. Now what happens is sometimes is that they lower rates so dramatically and so fast, everybody starts borrowing money. So there's tons of money that's out there, and they print that money, the paper money. So everyone's got this money. So what happens is, let's say there is one, I'm going to refer to the dog episode that got a lot of traction on social media. There's one dog, let's say there's 10 dogs out there. There's 10 dogs out there, and those dogs were $100 each. And you had to borrow that money to buy that dog, but you couldn't afford to borrow the money because the monthly payment was too high for that dog. All of a sudden, the Federal Reserve lowers interest rates to basically nothing. And all of a sudden, you can borrow that money and pay it over time for free because there's no interest that's owed on that money. All of a sudden, you're like, hey, we couldn't buy that dog when it cost us 5 percentage points a month to buy that dog. We couldn't afford the payment. But now it's 0, or it's 0.2, or it's 0.5, or it's 1. It's so cheap to borrow that money that we can afford to borrow that $100 to buy that dog, and the payments every month are something we can afford. So all of a sudden, those 10 dogs get bought. Now the guy producing these dogs says, holy shit, all the dogs are gone. We need more dogs. He gets another 10 dogs. But he knows how fast those 10 dogs sold last week. So this week he says, hey, I'm going to sell these dogs for $125. Well, 10 more people are like, that's okay. We'll pay $125 because it costs us so little to borrow that $125, and we can spread it over 20, 30, 15 years. So you're taking out a loan to buy that dog, and you can do it because the rate to pay back for that dog is super cheap. What you just experienced is inflation. Inflation occurs when money buys you less because there's too much money out there. So let me so like that dog reference is saying, as people get more access to capital and more access to capital because banks are lending and lending and lending, and it costs people nothing to borrow, the price goes up because people start bidding on the dogs because they don't really care because the payment is spread out, and on top of it, they have access to all this capital because it's being lent to them. This is how inflation occurs. So this is what we're in right now. We're in an inflationary environment that we haven't seen in a long time. So what does the Fed want to do? The Fed wants to pull money out of the system. Well, how do you pull money out of the system? You pull money out of the system by raising rates, and that's what they're doing right now. By raising rates, you make it more expensive to borrow that money over time, and you pull people out of the dog market because it costs them too much monthly to afford that dog. So what happens is, yes, dog prices will dip because there's less buyers out there. But at the same time, what you can buy with that dollar becomes even stronger because there's less dollars out there. So there's a scarcity of dollars. I really don't want to get into the strength of a dollar. That's like a whole other currency. That's a whole other talk. But the basics of it is raising rates pulls money out of the market by making it harder to borrow. And when I mean harder, more expensive, I should say it that way. And lowering rates puts money into the market because it's cheaper to borrow that money. That is what the Fed is trying to do right now with monetary policy. Now, a lot of people think, oh my God, the Fed is raising rates. That doesn't mean that the whole system is going to shut down and we're going to go into recession. I'm not saying we won't go to recession, but this is not that time for that discussion. What I'm saying is that normally the Fed raises rates because the environment is on fire. In other words, that something is occurring that's running a little too quick, and to damper it, the Fed raises rates. When things are running too slow, as they did at the start of COVID, they drop rates. That spurs buying. So another thing that you have to realize when the Fed, let me reverse that. So that's on what they're doing in terms of raising rates and lowering rates. Now, what are the people when people saw the rates go up, a lot of people called me up and said, oh my God, our mortgage is going up. No, it's not. When the Fed raises or lower rates, unless it's an absolute surprise, it's already priced in. What does that mean? You're going to hear this term all the time. Oh, it's already priced in. Money's free. It's already priced in.
Those two terms. Money's free is basically what finance people say when rates are so low that what you're borrowing money for is lower than the level of inflation. So let's say standard inflation is 3 to 3.5%. If you're borrowing money at 3% and inflation is 3%, it's a zero-sum game. That means you're basically borrowing money for free. And that's a whole other thing, but I just want to get that out there. The other thing I want to talk about is when you are doing that borrowing and you are borrowing for free, then when they start raising rates, that's when you start to feel the little pinch on that payment. The other thing that people are always concerned about is when you raise rates, what is the immediate effect? The immediate effect is going to be what your APR is on your credit cards. Anything that you have that's floating, if you look at it, and I did not know that people didn't understand this, but when the rates went up, I had a client call me and said, rates just went up 0.5 basis point. What's this mean for you? I'm like, well, your rate's already locked in. You already bought some. Don't worry about that. What that means for you is take a look at your credit cards, right? Because all of our credit cards, and that's called floating debt that is not secured for a period of time. All your floating debt, that immediately moves, right? So if you have a credit card that says, if you look at your credit card statement, it'll say the overnight rate, the rate plus, which is called prime, plus 2 points or 3 points. The minute that the Fed changes that rate, every day you're holding that credit card balance, it's now costing you more. All those credit cards that you have, all those balances, they all went up. So keep an eye on that because that's all being affected by the fact that they raised rates. That's an immediate effect. Now, this person said to me, hey, are my rates going to go up? I said, no, it's priced in. We'll get back to that. What is pricing in? What does it mean when people say it's priced in? Because if you turned on financial news after the 0.5 basis point, everyone's going to be like, it was already priced in. That means that the traders who trade the bond market, that's what really sets your mortgage rates up. They know that this rate hike was coming. It wasn't a surprise because the Fed has been transparent that they're going to raise rates. So the rates will actually move forward, move higher before interest rates move up. There are times when interest rates are increased that the Federal Reserve raises interest rates and your mortgage interest rates drop because the language that they say after the interest rates will basically tip you off on how much more raising they're going to do. So like when you see rates, like think about it all the time. Like how many times have you called a person for a loan and they're like, yesterday rates were 3.25, today they're 3.5, or tomorrow they're 3 or 2.75 or 4. How are these rates always floating? Well, the rates are floating because the interest rate that the Federal Reserve sets isn't moving all the time. It's the traders and the 10-year bond that's trying to figure out where the Fed's going to go. So as they're trying to figure out where the Fed's going to go, that's how rates move. When there's instability, right? Rates dropped when Russia invaded Ukraine. Why? It's instability. So what they're thinking is the Fed isn't going to raise rates a lot because of economic instability. So another thing that the Fed does too with their rates is looks at stability. Geopolitical stability, financial stability, all around the world, right? Because we're all connected business-wise. We're all connected. So if something bad happens on a foreign land, the Fed will keep a lookout because they want the economy to keep going. They may lower rates, not because of something that's happening in America, but something that's happening overseas that may affect business in America. So they're lowering rates so people don't stop spending. All right, so just to put it all in a nutshell, because I was a little bit all over the place. When the Fed wants to slow down growth because of inflation or the fears of coming inflation, which is why they should have raised rates earlier, they raise rates. When the Fed fears that there may be economic slowdown, be it COVID, be it a recession, be it a housing bubble burst, whatever it is, they will lower rates to spur lending, the banks to lend it cheaper and people to take that money. So that is that in a nutshell. Charlie, did that make sense?
Yep. Okay. Charlie says it makes sense, so I can move on.
You got it.
All right. That kind of leads me to stupid things people say to me. So, and these aren't, I mean, I may take a look at them and say they're kind of stupid, but I guess they're, uneducated statements. I think that's a better way to say it. Ignorant in its truest form. Ignorance in its truest form is actually not a bad word. It just means you're unknowledgeable of what you're saying, and you probably shouldn't say anything. So the biggest thing that I'm seeing now is because of the interest rates going up, is that everyone walks in to open houses, primarily people that don't have brokers, because those people think they're smarter than they are. Walk into open houses and go, I'm not buying now because, rates are going up, so prices are going to drop. Well, that's actually not necessarily true. If there is a recession, yes, prices will drop. If there's stagflation, inflation, and then causes issues to happen, yes, you could have price drops. However, if you look at a graph of housing prices now I can mentally go back to about 98. That's about when I started caring about what was happening in the world. It puts me close to 50. So 1998, 97, it's about as early as I can go. If you look at a graph from the late 90s to now, there has been multiple. You've got the tech bubble. You've got the Bear Stearns credit crunch, 07, 08. You've got a couple dips, tail end of 16 during the latter part of Obama's recession. You have all of these little blips that have happened. They are pullbacks. The market does go down. However, it recovers, and it recovers because it's a scarce resource. Housing has utility. It always recovers because it's needed. No one wants to sleep on a highway or street. They want a house. So it always recovers. So yes, there will be pullbacks. However, when people come to a house that I'm selling and say to me, well, we're going to wait because interest rates are going up and the market's going to fall apart. The reason I say that is not necessarily the case. And I would say that if I'm a betting man, I'm 80% that we're fine, 20% that something may happen. But I believe in pullbacks are healthy. So a little dip in pricing and then people entering the market and pulling it higher is not a problem to me. The main thing is someone just described this, sent me an email. Andy Embury, my financial advisor, sent me a tremendous email. And it said why the market is different this time. And we've been harping on it. And it has to do with the fact that there's no supply. With less than 1 month supply, let me run through this. So with less than 1 month supply, let's just say there's 100 houses in Bucktown, Wicker Park, Logan, Roscoe Village, Lincoln Park, North Center, Lincoln Square. Those are the areas I primarily work, Gold Coast. Okay? There's 100 houses. And there are 1,000 buyers at a mortgage rate of 3%. Okay. Mortgage rates go to 4%. There's now 800 buyers. There's less buyers, right? So there should be less demand. And that means there should be downward pressure. Okay. Now mortgage rates go to 5%. There's 500 people because we're pricing people out, right? Rates are going up. It's getting more expensive to lend. As it gets more expensive to lend, people start backing out of borrowing because it costs too much on a monthly basis. Now rates go to 6% and there's only 300 people. So we went from 1,000 people who could afford a house to 300 people who can afford a house. Why won't pricing change? Because there's only 100 homes, right? So there's still only 100 homes for those 300 people that can afford it. That environment does not produce lower prices. Lower prices are produced when the demand is beneath the supply. Then you'll start to see price pullback to get that pricing to where demand picks up and becomes at an equilibrium. We are nowhere near that equilibrium. Nowhere. With 0.8 months supply in these neighborhoods, in 3 weeks, if no one lists a house, there literally are no homes to buy in the city of Chicago in those areas. So that is why lower rates, when people come in and wait, they're not going to get what they want. On top of it, every time the mortgage rates go up 1 basis point. So when you go from 5% to 6%, you lose 10% of your buying power. That's a mathematical equation. It's back of the napkin math, but it's pretty damn close. So every time that you go up 1%, you lose 10% of your buying power. So as you sit and wait for pricing to go down, you're saying, hey, prices are going to go down because rates go down. Okay. So if you're buying $1 million house and rates are 6%, easy math, it's going to be $6,000. If you're borrowing at 5%, it's, at 5%, it's going to be $3,000, whatever. That is going to be what every month it is, every year it is to you. Okay. You take that yearly fee that you're paying, $10,000, $15,000, waiting. Now you're waiting, right? $10,000, $15,000 a year for that price to drop by $25,000 or $30,000. You're going to end up paying hundreds of thousands of dollars more just in interest because rates go up, and you can't afford that house because the monthly payment maybe doesn't slip into your debt to income ratio. So I'm not saying you shouldn't wait, but the negative of waiting far outweighs what you think is going to happen. The other reason I say, and this is what I told somebody this weekend, is Chicago is the single most affordable large city in the world, according to the bubble index. Okay. And let's say it's not number 0 anymore. Let's say it's not last place. It's second to last, or third to last. The simple fact of the matter is it's bottom 5%. And America, I just looked it up last night, Chicago is the 27th most expensive place. So 26 cities are more expensive to live in than Chicago. And Chicago is like the 4th or 5th most populated city, right? So here's my other thought. You have so much tech coming to Chicago, so many people from the coast because it's so out of control expensive, and businesses are coming here. If you think in the next 2 or 3 years, Chicago is going to dip, you've got another thing coming because it's so much lower than the other areas that as people flood here, even if the market softens, the amount of people flooding Chicago, and yes, they are because there's no vacancies in the high-end rentals that are paying $4 and like 75 cents a foot. Yeah, that's correct. $5,000 for a $1,000 bedroom, a $1,000 square foot place. If you think those people aren't going to sustain the market, you're wrong, because we've seen it happen. As other places have crashed majorly, the heart of Chicago, the areas that we work, have always kept maybe not value, but have always not fallen like the rest, as the affordability has always been there, right? So you don't have the swings. So I think if you're looking to buy, taking advantage of lower rates is far more productive to your pocketbook than waiting for a massive dip in the market, because the city is so cheap as it is. The coasts are up, like the West and the West and East Coast are up like 33% this year alone. Chicago's up like 18% year over year. That's a full year. In 1 year, we're less than 4 or 5 months on the coast. That floods, money finds its way, right? So that's why investment comes into Chicago, because it's the cost of living. So these are all factors that really play into the fact that waiting and people saying to me in open houses, oh, Chicago's getting cheaper, it's too expensive. That's not the case. Chicago is just finally becoming an affluent city. I've been here for a long time, and it's only been probably since 2002 and 2004, maybe 5, that people really flooded into the city. And on top of it, you have all these empty nesters. Now, most of them are moving out of state because of taxes, but the ones that are staying here, they're not paying $60,000, $70,000 in North Shore taxes or Hinsdale taxes or Clarendon Hills or the West, right? They're coming back into the city because they don't need to pay all those taxes. And we see it, the amount of empty nesters that are flooding back into the city and buying another place in a different state is tremendous. That's why there's no inventory in those spots. I mean, there's a reason that, last year there was more $4 million homes sold than any other year. Like, they broke records, and we're on a pace to break records again because of the fact that you're having a migration out of the suburbs. Now, yes, there's no inventory in the suburbs either because they hadn't been building for so long, but the pricing in the suburbs is still far below than the highs, where the city is well past the highs of where they're at. I think we're like 77% from the bottoms. So That's the other thing that we're seeing. So the big takeaway is, not only do you know where the Fed's headed, raising rates, you can't wait and say, I'm going to pick another crash. It never happens. What ends up happening is you just stay on the sidelines. You end up buying nothing versus going out and putting your foot in the water, grabbing low interest rates before they go much higher. And if there is a price pullback, it really doesn't matter. You own your place. Your price will never change. If there's a pullback, if rates go higher and housing gets more expensive, just FYI, if you're renting, your rent will go up. As interest rates go up, that price is passed on to the consumer. Last year alone, rents in Chicago went up 25%. Half of the people I closed this month left their rentals because the price increases went up 33%. So those are kind of the big things that I've noticed over the last 2 weeks in terms of the Federal Reserve and what people are coming in and saying at open houses in terms of, we can't believe how expensive the city is. We can't believe we're waiting for the market to go down because rates are going up. Financially, take a look at that spread. And on top of it, Chicago is the single worst place on a spread to rent versus buy. There is no worse place in America to rent via what it costs to own. So those are all factors that, unless you need complete flexibility, you're only going to be in and out in a little bit. Renting in the city of Chicago and waiting for rates to go higher to lower prices is just ludicrous when it comes to actual financial sense. Those are the two big things that I wanted to hit on. Please feel free to ping us if you have any other questions, any concerns. If you want to open up discussion, definitely reach out to us. I will leave you on the ism today for my father was KISS, keep it simple, stupid. And then also, I love the 5 Ps, proper preparation prevents poor performance. Those are the two. We're going to hit a couple other two next time. I really appreciate you downloading. We have over 300 downloads so far, so that's been great and a lot of great feedback. Any other questions, let me know, reach out, and we will talk to you guys soon. Thanks again, and thanks for listening to the Jason Theory.